Hey everybody, I'm excited to start working on our April project. As you guys know, we've been talking about courage, we've been talking about connecting with our wild woman and our spirit animal. And I mentioned in the journal that I'm very touched and inspired by the lion and the essence of a lion and the bravery and courageous heart of a lion. And so I wanted to do a piece of a girl and a lion, kind of representing my connection with the lion. It's not a self-portrait or anything like that, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to do. So first of all, this is my reference image that I've actually printed out to scale. This is an 8x8 cradled wood board. I am going to be tinting the surface with some gesso and some burnt sienna and raw sienna to kind of create a warm base. And then I'm going to be transferring some of the main forms onto the piece, drawing it in and creating all my values, and then actually going in with, we're going to start in acrylics and I'm going to go in with some oils. You know, I keep resisting oils in some ways, but every single time I paint with them, I'm like, why don't I always paint with oils? Like, I just love them so much. I encourage you guys to try them. They're not as scary as you think. But anyway, more on that later. I wanted to also talk about, you know, in a lot of the journals I've mentioned going to an art museum, and you know, if you have an art center, an art museum in your area, I think it's invaluable to go and look at art. I was very inspired. We went yesterday with the family and I saw an artist named Isabel Bishop. And she's an American painter, or was an American painter, and she created beautiful works, they're very much based in drawing, but they have these wonderful variations of value, kind of monotone, but I mean, not all of her works are, but the ones that I liked were kind of very soft, kind of a lot of similar values. And our theme, you know, our color theme of the month is the yellows and the blues. So I'm gonna be working with them, but probably in a kind of very earthy way. So a little bit more subdued than maybe our color palette page. But that's kind of my thinking. And I'm going to do the whole painting, underpainting in acrylic, like I mentioned. So check out Isabel Bishop. I will put in a couple images, you know, in the journal so you can see some of her work. But, you know, of course, we've been inspired by Frida this month, and I was happy to be inspired by a second woman artist. So I thought I would bring her to you as well. So I am going to take some gesso and some burnt sienna and raw sienna. I think I'm going to gesso this first, and then I'm going to do a wash of a combo of these. So I am going to get started with that. So one thing I also wanted to mention, guys, is that this photo reference is actually something I created. I took this girl from Unsplash and this lion from Unsplash, and then in Procreate on my phone, I combined them digitally and then printed it out. So that's something to consider if you want to play with photo references and you want to combine like an animal and a figure. It's really fun to go into Procreate, which is an app you can get for your phone. It's only on iOS, unfortunately, but I know there are some other photo apps you can get on Android. And this is just a great way to be able to combine elements so that you can kind of get a good photo reference. But, you know, of course you can always draw from your imagination, but I just wanted to have something that I could work from. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that this is a pre-gessoed board, but I'm not crazy about the finish. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and gesso it myself. And then I may even sand it a little bit. And, you know, we've been talking about courage this month, and we all know it takes courage to start something. So, you know, talking you through what my inner critic is saying right now is that, you know, I'm not going to be able to do this painting, and it's going to look ridiculous, and why would I think I could make something, you know, beautiful out of this reference? And so, you know, that's what's going on in my head right now, and I am sharing that with you because I want you to know that that's what I go through, and I know that you guys can relate. Sometimes it's just really hard. I mean, I'll even sometimes get really grumpy before I start a painting. Like, you can ask my husband, he knows. or I feel very defensive, or I feel like on edge. And it's because I'm kind of approaching that precipice of jumping out into the unknown and creating, and especially creating on camera. For those of you that do film your own work and teach like I do, that's kind of added. It's an added sort of fear because now you're documenting it, and obviously I can always edit my work, but I just wanted to let you guys know that that is stuff that I hear in my head. But on the other side, you know, speaking to our inner guide, I'm excited to start something new, and I'm excited to try this. And my inner guide is saying, hey, you know, give it your best shot and see what happens, and don't be too hard on yourself. And, you know, you have skill, you have talent, like keep moving forward and trust that you will figure this out. So that's what my inner guide is saying. She's much nicer than my inner critic. So hopefully she is right. All right, so I'm going to dry this, and then I'm going to go ahead and tint the whole canvas with, as I mentioned, a blend of raw sienna, raw umber. It's going to be just a wash because I want to be able to see my line work and my drawings. So it's just going to be a light wash. I will be back after this is dry. Okay guys, so this has got 2 layers actually of gesso, and I just used the Liquitex Basics gesso. You can use whatever gesso you want. I did get a piece of fine grit sandpaper. This is a 150, and I'm just gonna gently do a little sanding. Ideally, you probably want to do that outside. There is a little bit of dust that comes off of there. But this is just to give me a little bit of a smoother surface. Since I am doing a portrait on here, I don't want it to be too bumpy. So I'm just going to take a soft brush and kind of sweep away any excess dust. It's not as dusty as, like, you know, sanding plaster. For those of you who've worked with plaster, you know how dusty that gets. But now my surface is quite smooth, which is what I want. So I am going to take some carbon paper. You guys have seen me do this before. I'm going to transfer the main shapes of this piece, or this photograph. And that is going to help me just get started. I'm going to get a little bit of tape. And the main purpose of this is obviously not to get all the details down, but to get your forms on there so that they are the right scale. I think that's one of the hardest things about painting sometimes is that we miss the scale sometimes, and then we end up not really honoring the composition. Like, I designed this to look a certain way, so I want to make sure that the shapes go on there in this way, and they interact with my boundaries in the way that I designed the composition. So, got that. Just going to get like a pencil. I'll often just use like a mechanical pencil. And then make sure everything's straight. So I want to just kind of get the big shapes on there. I'm going to kind of outline where the skull of or the head of the lion is. I want to kind of get the outline of her. And again, I'm going to have to still go in and draw a lot of the details. But at least I know that my head is in the right area, you know, and I kind of have things started out in the right way. And, you know, if you're newer to faces too, this is such an approachable way to start a portrait, because you get the proportions in place and you know, you can really focus on painting, and that's really what I'm pretty excited about doing for this. Let me make sure everything's transferring. Yeah, it is. Okay. Now, of course, you know, if you want to challenge yourself and not do this, you absolutely can. You guys know I love to draw freehand as well. But for this, I really wanted to make sure I got all the forms in place. And don't feel bad about doing this either. Like, you know, oh shoot, I just moved it. Because it still takes a lot of skill, as you guys know, and technique and patience and all that to get this right in a painting. So if you want to focus on your painting techniques, this is a great way to kind of jump ahead and go for it. And also what I've realized too is that as much as I love, you know, doing these lessons, I want to make them approachable, and I want to make them things that you can do in one sitting, and you don't have to necessarily, you know, spend weeks creating the monthly project, because we all are busy, right? We all have stuff going on in our lives, and we want this to be fun, approachable, but still learning. Okay, so as you can see here, let me get this off. What that does for me is it gets all the forms on there. And then I can go in and really work more on the drawing and obviously getting into the painting. So hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah. So now I can go in with my, I just realized I was supposed to tone the canvas first. Oh well, that's okay. I'll work on the sketch, and then I'll tone the canvas, I guess. And you could also do this with one of your sketches too. If you have a sketch in your sketchbook and you wanted to transfer it to a board, I've done that. I think I did that with the Girl in the Moon. You know, kind of drew it and then went in and transferred it. And a lot of the masters would do that back in the day. They would use I think it was called the Oculus Obscura or something like that, and they would transfer their work, you know, when they had to do murals and whatnot, they would transfer their drawings by projecting them up onto the wall so that they could get the scale right. So kind of a little bit of history there for you, but interesting how they used a sort of interesting or a different way of transferring their work up onto the wall or their surface that they were using. So I'm not going to go too far into this. I'm going to actually do a little matte medium over this because I don't want, if I add a bunch of water, I'll probably lose all my lines. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just go over this with some matte medium, kind of fix these lines so that I don't lose them when I do my wash. Anytime you want to fix a sketch, you can always put some matte medium down. Now, if I had done this the way I planned, I would have tinted the board first. So that would be my recommendation. Don't work backwards the way I did. I got a little too excited, as usual, and jumped into just adding my drawing onto the board. Okay. Okay guys, so that is all dry. I'm gonna put out some paint now and just tint the board. So I'm using some raw sienna. These are the Arteza paints. I've been enjoying these lately. They're just, I don't know, they're just easy to use. I have them laying around and they're not very expensive, so they're perfect for an underpainting. As I mentioned, Isabel Bishop kind of had this lovely sort of painterly look to her work, and it looked like she would often work from sort of a sienna, raw sienna, sort of a tinted board. So that's what I'm going with. It's going to give us that golden effect right away. I don't want it to be too dark. Just kind of as a place to start. You might get some, you know, sort of textures that come up from where the sanding was and all that, but I'm not going to be too worried about it because I'm going to be adding oil paint on top of all of this. But I like starting with this nice warm sort of wash. Okay, lots of drying. So I'm going to also introduce some burnt umber because I do want to sort of build up the values. You know, we've got lots of lights and darks going on in here. So I do want to build up the values in this sort of palette. And just get started. So I'm mixing a little bit of the burnt umber and raw sienna, and I'm going to just start to maybe I'll actually, well, no, I'll keep going with this for now. Kind of being a little bit sketchy with it. I'm working in thin layers. I will obviously be able to get really smooth blends with the oils, which I love. So I'm working really loose. I want there to be this sketchy kind of quality to this. So I'm trying to be conscious of that by keeping things pretty loose. And I can do that now, especially because I have the forms on board. So it kind of frees you up. I'm using my Princeton Round Select brush number 6. It's my scrubby brush. I'm going to use a longer brush now. I'm doing this is a Catalyst brush by Princeton. It's a 2/0 and it's a round brush. I'm going to try this guy out for sketching a little bit more with the paint. If you look at Isabel's work, you see quite a bit of line work, which I kind of like. I'm going to need a finer brush. Let's see. This is a Winsor Newton Cotman brush. Number 11? No, number 1, round. It's actually a watercolor brush, but you can use it for acrylic too. And this is where I'm definitely having to go back and kind of draw with the paint a little bit and kind of go back and study the reference picture, work from that. So I'm kind of brushing this on, and I'm almost shading with the paint now. Kind of dry brushing thin layers just to build some value.